Hey guys, welcome back to the MVP Momentum podcast. Today I'm with Gage and we're talking about, this year's NBA draft. This is a podcast I've been looking forward to doing for a while. I'm a big draft guy. I like to talk about the draft and kind of, draft prospects and where they could go and things like that. And we're gonna kind of dig in deep. But, as a lot of you may know, this draft is kind of a little bit weaker at the top, but it's kind of, it's kind of the eye of the beholder, and kind of how teams think about these guys individually. But before we get into this 10-team mock draft we're going to talk about kind of our thoughts, about the draft in general. And yeah, Gage, do you want to say a few thoughts about this draft and kind of what you think about it?
Uh, I think there are a lot of projects in this draft. Like I think we were talking when we talked earlier a little bit, Peyton, about it. It was like there are like a lot of players that aren't like, oh, they're gonna change the league here. Like it's not like last year where you're like, oh man. A lot of these players have weaknesses that need to be addressed. I would say maybe every single one of them have a weakness that needs to be addressed.
Hmm.
Just like, and it's like a severe thing that is they're going to be their focus heading into the rest of the summer. Um, so this draft is pretty hard to do, um, just because it's not as obvious as last year and a few years before that. So I expect that we're going to make a lot of mistakes, but
Hmm.
I think we'll be okay. Like I don't think anyone can predict this one.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it's just so crazy because, like I told you off air, I've been listening to a few guys I really trust about their draft content, and the variance between team to team, GM to GM, and scouting guys is just there's so much variance there. And it's really hard to know what team really wants what, and draft day trades I think are going to be probably the most active we've seen in a while. Because I know some teams like the Rockets, maybe the Hornets or Blazers think that they can draft down and kind of get the same kind of quality, or maybe the Rockets, for example, think, or maybe even the Hawks on draft night think that they don't necessarily need to pick, and they can get a proven player. But I kind of wanted to say my little spiel on this draft in general and kind of how people are talking about this draft. And I honestly think that, it's kind of obvious. This draft, like you said, has a lot of projects. It's not very heavy at the top, right? You don't have a Wemby, obviously. You don't have a Chet. I mean, honestly, if you think about the last three drafts, not talk, but just think about 2023, 2022, 2021, right? All of the top four picks, I think, in those drafts, maybe not Jalen Suggs. I would say him as a prospect, but I don't know about him as a player. But all the top four picks in those drafts would go in one or two, I think, in this draft. And so yeah, it's not very heavy at the top. Not as a prospect view. But I do think that at some point, some of these players are going to be all stars, just like any other draft. This draft gets a lot of comparisons to the 2014 draft. And obviously that had Giannis in it. I don't think this draft is going to have Giannis. It could, but I don't think it does. But people forget that draft also had Victor Oladipo. It had Jonas Valanciunas, I believe, or maybe it was Vucevic. But anyways, it had a couple of good centers in that draft as well. And so I just think that people are really down in this draft, and I think these guys, are all going to have kind of a chip on their shoulder, thinking everybody thinks this draft is really bad. Well, I'm going to show them that I'm going to be an all-star. And I do think these guys kind of think about that because these guys are hearing kind of the crowd noise. They know that people don't think this draft is very good, and I think they're gonna really come out and make sure that they show that they deserve to be a real number one, two, three, four, five pick in this draft. So without further ado, let's get into the draft. Gage is gonna lead us off at number one, and we're gonna kind of talk about each of these guys individually. So take it off, Gage.
Yeah. So for number one, this one was tough because like it depends on how you feel about the Trae Young situation. I mean, and the DeJounte Murray. If you're still buying into the Trae Young and you're looking to ship Clint Capella out, which I think is likely the case, I think you're gonna pick Alex Sarr as number one. He just
Hmm.
fits in exactly how you wanted. Uh, you wanted Mitchell. You wanted Clint Capella to fit in. I think they're ready to stop. acting like Onyeka is that replacement. It's been a while. He's undersized, and their defense hasn't really improved. So and I was thinking it would have been Zachary, like at number 1, but I think that they aren't. Zachary is more of a kind of more. You're getting to a wing. And I think the Hawks are still trying to compete a little bit with this roster, especially if they can move Clint and DeJounte or even Trey. So it's going to be Alex Sarr. He's just a great defender. Not as great as, someone who can cover up like for Trey, like Wemby or something like that. But
not an all defense kind of guy, maybe, but
no.
Really good though.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with the pick. I don't know if you've heard about any of the stuff about him not really wanting to work out with Atlanta. But honestly, like, whenever that stuff happens, whether it's NBA, NFL, I don't really think it means too much because they really have the players don't have any leverage. If you get drafted, you're gonna have to play for them no matter what, and you're not gonna be bad on purpose just because you got drafted by a team you didn't want to play for, So, you know,
And even then, it's like not that he's like a shining like, he's not a star right off the bat because he can't really shoot the 3 ball, and so a little bit of his offensive game is a little outdated. I wouldn't say it's like completely like Jahlil Okafor like outdated, but
right.
if you can't stretch the floor, you're gonna have to rely a lot on your athleticism to cut, which he can and catch oops and be that kind of guy. But you're not gonna see him last very long until he develops that jumper, like a Brook Lopez or Al Horford or those kind of guys who can just last in the league for a while.
Right. Yeah, I would say when I think of Alex Sarr, I think of a guy kind of similar to Evan Mobley, where he's going to be a really high impact defender. But I just don't know if I see him making a lot of threes at a high clip in the NBA.
I don't want to say he's a bad 3-point shooter, but I'm saying that like it's not like crisp. It's a bit of a slow 3-point shot.
It's what you would think of an average space out 5-out center would be. It's about 30% on about 2.5 attempts, and which is fine. That will work, but it's like he's not going to be a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. And I heard of this one. There we go, 28% there. I heard of Jonathan Givony talking about him and talking about who he wants to be. And he's like, he wants to be Jaren Jackson Jr. He wants to be Brook Lopez. And I was thinking, great. He wants to be that guy, but is he going to be able to develop into that guy? I think lots of players want to be Kyrie Irving. I think lots of players want to be LeBron James. But just because you want to be that guy doesn't mean you are that guy or you can develop to be that guy. I think if he can get his threes up to 34%, I think that'd be great. If he can do that, that's all you need to be a stretch center. But we just don't have very much proof of that. But let's move on to my pick here at number 2. And just for kind of a preface, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but we are going to go in snake draft order. So I'm going to have 2, 3, and so on. And so that's kind of how we're doing this draft here. But yeah, with the Wizards, I definitely think that going into draft night, they kind of expected to have Sarr here, but I think they're kind of just going to go with the guy that they think they should have went, or they should have thought that was going to go number 1. And they're going to go with Zachary Risacher. I think that Risacher is, I hate to say it at number 2, but I just think that he has a very limited ceiling, but he has a great floor. I think his floor is somewhere around an average 3-and-D player that will give you good production. And that's going to be kind of like what he has to develop into in a couple years. He had a really weird shooting year this year where he was kind of off and on. Sometimes he would be 75% from the game from 3, and sometimes he would be 25%. Obviously, he's shooting 39% this year. That's great. I think he's a really capable defender on ball. I think I would be a little bit concerned if he was like my primary defender, but I don't think any team that realistically has done their homework expects him to be the best defender or second, third best defender in the starting lineup. But if he can just kind of give everyone else spacing at that long frame, have some good transition offense, I think he can do a lot for that Wizards offense. And then also with that, you don't really have to tie yourself to Kuzma anymore. You can kind of get what you want for Kuzma, or they can play together, and you could have a lineup of Bilal, Risa, and Kuzma all together, because now you don't have Gafford, with Tyus Jones and whoever else maybe you want to get in next year's draft. So I think it's a good fit. I think he fits a lot of teams, honestly. I just think that you realize that his ceiling isn't going to be anything crazy, but it's like in this draft, it's hard to really complain about that because a lot of these guys don't have a very high ceiling anyways. But you
I
know you're getting a decent 3-and-D player. I think my comp for him is kind of a Harrison Barnes, Trevor Ariza with some length, I think is kind of how I'd like to put him.
I think he has a pretty good. I think he has a pretty good ceiling as a 3-and-D player, and I think you're short selling that a little bit. Like, his ceiling isn't that high. To be a 3-and-D player is like, that's the next best thing from being a star.
Mm.
I just and noticing that most of his weaknesses are just, again, he needs to build up some strength, like a lot of these guys, and then just lack of playmaking or lack of basketball IQ. Sometimes he makes sloppy turnovers. I just think, uh, yeah, sloppy turnovers and fouls. I think for a 3-and-D guy, those are things you can work on. You don't really need him to run the offense. I don't think he'll ever have to. I think the best case scenario, his absolute peak is probably like uh, maybe like a Franz Wagner or something, or maybe even a
Uh. See, here's my
OG would be amazing, but he's not going to
here's
get
my
OG.
problem. Here's my problem with that. I love his shot making ability, but I don't love his point of attack defense. I don't love his on ball defense. I think it's good. I don't think it's great. And great is a lot different than elite. You know what I mean? I think he's like 2, 3 levels away from being a really good defender. Now maybe he can develop into that, you know. But when you can't necessarily be elite at it, and then also you can't create your own shot, I think it's just there's just in this draft, it's this draft and with him as well. There is a certain amount of weaknesses you can have to be a great player to where it knocks you down. Like a lot of this class struggles with self-creation. As simple as that. They struggle with point of attack defense. Big part of the game. They struggle with playmaking, floor vision. So when you lack things that are super significant to being a great player, I think it limits your ceiling, and you're asking them to do 2, 3 things that are so impactful that they're just going to be so far behind their peers. It's really tough to imagine them becoming great players. And like I said before in my intro, there's going to be players that do it. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be guys that are here that are all stars, at some point. Maybe we don't see it coming. Maybe it's a guy we don't even talk about today. But there's going to be guys that work on those things and they just get better because they're just in the NBA now. But yeah, your pick is next up here.
Okay, so number 4,
3.
3.
Yep. Oh, that's my pick.
Yeah, your pick.
My pick, yeah. So this is my team actually, so it's kind of funny. And if anyone who's watching this has watched other mock drafts, it's not going to be anything flashy. It's going to be the guy that everyone's taking. It's Reed Shepherd at 3. And let me give my kind of spiel on Reed Shepherd here. You were kind of asking about it off air here, but I think that Reed Shepherd is the type of guy that he's not going to ever be. I mean, honestly, I've heard Steve Nash comps, but I don't think he's got the savvy, if that makes sense, to be a Steve Nash. But I think that he has a very real possibility of being a very solid point guard starter that's never going to be an all-star, but always going to be a very good player, kind of like Kyle Lowry or Fred VanVleet, who was an All-Star one year, but he's a great 3-point shooter. I think he's one of the best 3-point shooters I've ever scouted in 3-4 years that I've been doing this. I mean, easily, I guess he's the best, one of the best 3-point shooters. His playmaking is decent, you know. I think that sometimes it's kind of like, was it just the Kentucky offense? But anyways, yeah, but his playmaking is it's, you know, it's, you can really work with it. I think his athleticism is really good. He had the highest vertical in the combine this year. Um, and I think that, you know, just kind of his background is really solid as well. Both of his parents went to Kentucky and played basketball. I think he's just a very good basketball player in general. I don't think besides his 3-point shooting, he has a whole ton of strengths, but I think he's a player that's always going to be good at a lot of things. Now, obviously, you look at his size; he's 6'2" and a half, I believe, 6'2" ish. Tankathon has him listed at 6'3", but I've heard he's been docked in a little bit shorter than that. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's really the only knock that you have on him. And obviously, in modern day NBA, it's kind of a big deal because you have all these big guards. But I don't think he's, at least not in the first couple years, especially because the Rockets had Fred, Jalen, Cam, Amen. I don't think he's going to be asked to be the main ball handler or point of attack defender his first couple years. So I don't really think you really have to worry about his size too much. But at the end of the day, you know it's going to limit his upside because you can't be 6'2". Like, if you think about all the guys in the NBA that have ever been really good, and I'm talking about all-star pluses, because I think Reed Sheppard could be an all-star, maybe 3-4 time all-star in his career in like 12, 13 years. If you think about all those guys, how many of those guys are 6'2" and end up being star players? You know, not a lot, right? So, you know, obviously that's going to limit his upside there, but I think he's just a really solid player. And if you're Houston, you have so many of these young guys in your treasure chest that you're not really worried about upside. You just want a guy that you can plug and play, has some upside to be a really good player someday, maybe a fourth guy, fifth guy on a championship team, and you're okay with that. And honestly, you're even more okay with that because it's not even your pick, it's the Brooklyn pick. So, you know, that's kind of just how the draft is. You just have to live with it.
Yeah, I think he's. I mean, he's one of the best, things you could hope for in a 3-point shooter of his height. Like normally, if I were to be blindfolded and you tell me, okay, you have this 3-point shooter who's about 6'3", 6'1", whatever. What is his worst weakness? And he's an absolute liability on defense. That's what you would normally think. But this
Yeah.
guy, he has the basketball IQ to not, he gambles. He does gamble, but he
Yeah.
makes smart, educated, decisions when to go after the ball, and more often than not, it translates into steals. And that's one. How often do you see a guy this height, reliably be like, yeah, he's number 3, and he's just without the athleticism. What makes this guy so special? It's
Yeah.
just because normally when you ask for a guy with that basketball IQ plus 3-point shot and efficiency, most of the times it translates to just poor defense and just getting exploited or getting pick hunted. But he's not going to be that case. So yeah.
You know, one thing I didn't even mention about him too that I think does matter to GMs and scouts. At the end of the day, Kentucky guys just translate, man. You know, like I mean, honestly though, very few of them don't translate. If you really think about it, if you were to go through the last 8 years of drafts, you know, if you were to go back to 2016, I would bet you that most of those Kentucky guys that got drafted in the top 12 translated. Maybe 3, 4 didn't, but I bet you 10 to 12 did. And those are good odds. So yeah, that's another thing that I think does matter. And maybe later we're talking about. I mean, we will talk about it whether he gets drafted or not. We're gonna talk about Rob later. But you know that's another Kentucky guy. But yeah, now your pick is up at 4 here, the San
Yeah.
Antonio Spurs.
This guy, yeah. So the next person I got up, actually, number 4 is going to be Stephon Castle.
Hmm.
And I think that because I would put him as the highest ceiling in the draft. And so if you wanted a dark horse that goes number 1, it would be this guy. And the reason for that is because he already projects to be, a better defender in the NBA. He is, he's already a slasher. He can already get you a bucket. He has championship, he has championship DNA. He's 37, 37-inch vertical at 6'6", which is amazing. Well, not amazing, but it's a
It's
welcome
solid.
it's a welcome addition.
Yeah, it's solid.
But like he's your perfect. I'm gonna put him into any NBA offense, and they would be happy to fit him in.
Yeah.
But there is one weakness of this guy, like we already talked about, that this draft was gonna be his 3-point shooting, which is he's shooting about 26.7%, and that is just unacceptable for the NBA, and often more times often than not, that would be what would stop you from actually even being drafted. We do see a lot of freak athletes, but he is really that gifted guy. I think he went from Atlanta to UConn. I think that's what his path was, and he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. So he's always, I think he was part of the FIBA. I think he was part of the FIBA Youth 18 championship or something like that. But anyways, he's been a bona fide winner all the way up until now. So, in a draft full of projects, I'd be okay with drafting this guy and working on his 3-point shot. Although if he were to be a bust, well, yeah, I guess it would be bust, or he's either a bust or he's gonna go he's gonna be a star. I believe that.
Yeah, I agree with you. He has a pretty high ceiling as well. And I've heard that from a few different guys that I trust, that he's a big boomer bust guy. He reminds me a lot of I don't know, because here's the thing: is that he plays like he's very 3-and-D-ish without the three, but more like drive and D, right? More of a ISO drive and D. He
Driving D.
plays a lot like, I don't want to say Cam Whitmore, but he kind of plays like Cam Whitmore, but maybe a little bit more engaged on the defensive side of the ball. But I have a better Cam Whitmore comp later. But yeah, I don't I don't know. Yeah, I mean, obviously he struggles with shooting. Free throw shooting is kind of rough, but I think he's a really effective finisher in the paint. I think he plays probably the best perimeter defense in the class, and I think in this kind of class that's very coveted and valued. And when you're the Spurs and you have 2 picks, I think you can afford to get Castle here, because he may not be there past the Pistons or past the Hornets, so, or even past Portland, maybe. So you really need to focus on that here. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think it's a good pick. I think NBA teams will kind of be in love with him, honestly. And that's kind of what I've heard. So I think that's a good pick there.
Okay, so this is number 5, right?
Yep.
So this number 5, it's going to be between Donovan Clingan and Matas. This one was tough because on one hand you have Donovan Clingan is purely an anchor for your defense. If you want him, well, it's expected that he can be an anchor. He'd be a good solid piece.
Mm-hmm.
Will he be? That's the question we always have for when we're drafting rookies. I think my pick actually is going to be Matas.
Yeah.
It's a little spicy because I think 70% of the time you would choose Klingon, and the reason why I think that is because he seems able to produce based on what he's been doing in the G League, but a lot of his shortcomings seem to come up when his strength. If he's able, he's been back down and he hasn't been able to get the shot he wants when he drives in the paint. but I think he gives you a little bit of everything, and I think that's what makes him an interesting project for a lot of teams. I don't think he's really good at anything yet. But I think you can really shape him into something. And for who was number 5 again? Who was number 5 pick?
Number 4 was Stephon Castle.
No, number 5. The team.
Oh, the Pistons.
Yeah, the Pistons. For the Pistons, I think that's the kind of player they want right now because I think they already have their fair share of, paint protectors if they wanted to. So
Yeah.
I think it's a guy you can just kind of morph into, the guy who can fit your future offense.
Yeah, I agree with you. I personally think that the Pistons are really bought into Jalen Duren still, and I think that they think Isaiah Stewart can still be a good NBA player for their future. This is gonna get real spicy and hot takey, but Matas Buzelos is my biggest boomer bust prospect this year. I think he could potentially be the best player in this draft. I think he could potentially be the worst out of the top lottery picks. I think it's honestly going to depend on the shooting. You can see here, he shot 26% from three, 70% from the free throw line. Really rough, right? But if you look at his high school numbers, because this was in the G League Ignite, this is his first year outside of high school. If you look at his high school numbers, he shot the ball really well. And even then, like, he didn't shoot the ball well this year, and he still had 14 points per game. So, I think he has the potential to be in college. If he just would have shot 33%, 32%, he had the potential to put up 18, 19 points per game while he was an elite shot blocker and rim protector. He's probably one of the best guys I've seen recently weak side shot block as a guard or a forward, whatever you want to classify him as. I think that at 6'10", him being as good of a shot blocker as he is, because he's really skinny, he's only 197. He has great instincts at the rim as far as defensively. He has great timing, and I think that's going to be something that teams really value. But honestly, his potential as a player as a whole is going to come in his offensive game. But he's also a great cutter. He's a good off-ball kind of glue guy right now, and he's a good connector passer. But for him to really be a guy, he's got to be able to shoot the ball, and he's got to be able to not necessarily create his own shot, but he's got to be able to, get his shot without having to have someone set him up. I know that kind of sounds weird because it sounds like basically what
He's
I'm saying is he has to self-create, but I
he's
really
always
just
short,
want him. What's that?
Yeah, he's like always short on some sort of skill. Like,
Yeah, it's like he can't self-create, he can't shoot,
but
but he's a very effective cutter, he has good hands and he's a good finisher. And it's like if he could just have like one or two of those other things, he could really be, I think, a top 3 player in this class. I honestly think if he shot 35% this year, from 3, he would probably be going top 3 in the draft.
yeah,
Almost unanimously. Because like I just think shooting matters too much to teams now. If you're not an elite perimeter defender, then you're gonna get knocked for it. Because I don't think he's an elite perimeter defender. He's a good one, but he's not Stephon Castle. So that's why we have him going at 5 here.
yep,
So we are finally here at the Hornets pick, and last year it's getting kind of crazy, and I was doing a lot of trades, and I was thinking about it this year, and I was like, not really a fan of doing that as much because if I want to be accurate, if I want to be true to the process, you really can't predict a trade. It's just too hard to do. There's too many moving parts. I don't even know what teams are valuing what players, stuff like that. So, I'm not gonna do that anymore. This is one of the teams I would have done a trade with here, but I think I'm just gonna stay safe, or maybe not safe, but safe enough. I'm actually gonna take. Well, no, I'm taking a player, but the player is not safe. I am taking Ron Holland here. I think that with Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, Mark Williams. I think that they can take a gamble on a guy that could end up being one of the best players in the draft as well. And it's weird because two G League guys go back to back, right? How weird is that? But last year, two overtime elite guys went back to back, and I think it's a close enough thing where you know I feel like teams want to gamble on that. And here's the thing about him, and this is my Cam Whitmore take comp here. I think Cam Whitmore is the type of guy that they would have in a redraft. If they could go back in time, they would have taken him instead of Asar Thompson. I think because of his shooting, because of his self-creation, that's something they desperately lacked last year. They don't need any more of these connector guys. They don't need Cody Williams. They don't need Dalton Connect. They're done with this connector guy thing. They want a guy that has the potential to go get himself a bucket. And when Ron Holland gets the ball, it's over. There's nobody else that's going to touch the ball that possession, just like Cam Whitmore. Which I think at this point in their stage, that's fine because I don't think Cade Cunningham necessarily cares that much if a guy wants to get his own bucket. Same with Jaden Ivey, same with Jalen Duren. They want a guy that can go score, and I think Ron Holland has the potential to do that. He's a good rebounder. Obviously, his shooting, just like his G League teammate Matas, was not very good this year, but everything else was pretty solid. He was still able to put up great points. Um, I wasn't really familiar with his on-ball defense, but I'm sure it's solid. You could see here he averaged about 2.5 steals. Obviously, the turnover is a little bit scary, especially when you consider his assist totals, but that's kind of just the player you get with the kind of guy that puts his head down and just goes right to the rack. But something that I did appreciate about Ron Holland is he just seems like a guy that's always going to bring it, 100% when he plays, and I think that matters to teams. And I think with the Hornets, especially at 6 here, you are considering fit, in this kind of draft. And so I think if you think about the fit with the team, he's perfect with Brandon Miller, who's a great spot up shooter. Kind of that self-creating spot up shooter who can play in transition. LaMelo Ball, who's a pass first point guard who can score. Ron Holland, I think, fits right in there at the 3. You still have Mark Williams there, and then you can maybe try to draft a 4 or a 5 next year. So, I think it's perfect, honestly.
I think that's crazy because if that is who you got, and I was thinking you're gonna pick Donovan next. I really did.
Yeah.
But if Donovan doesn't go here, how far off does he? He falls. Because what
Huh.
is Portland gonna pick him up? Is San Antonio gonna pick him up
Well,
over
well,
Wemby? He's gonna be competing.
so here's the thing. If I was giving you, because you're gonna control 7 and 8, right? The next couple picks. If I were to give you a recommendation, I don't think he falls past Portland. I think there's no way that he falls past Portland. I think that he's the DeAndre Ayton successor that can be there long term because I don't see Ayton being there long term, and I think he's too good of
Really?
a talent. Yeah, and I even think like he's too good of a talent to pass up at that point. Because I think DeAndre Ayton is one of those guys where he's young, but he's not young young. So that's what my recommendation would be. But you are right though. If he doesn't go to Portland, doesn't go to the doesn't go to the Spurs because I don't think they want to draft a center there. How far does he fall? Does he go? Well, I think his limit is 9 to the Grizzlies. I
So
think that's where he goes.
are they
Yeah,
gonna? I guess. Yeah. I guess they can. I
that would be
mean,
great for the Grizz. If
yeah.
he fell that far,
You think?
you
I
know.
mean, will he go to Portland as a backup to Ian? Are they cool with that? Because that's what's gonna happen. They're gonna have a
Well,
rookie as a backup.
I don't know. I guess it depends how. Here's what it depends on. Do you want to back up for Grant or do you want to back up for Aiden? And I think with Aiden's availability, you kind of need that a little bit more. That's what I think.
I don't know. That's spicy.
But
Bringing.
you could pick Cody Williams or Don't Connect if you really wanted a 3. But then here's the thing. With that, you're assuming that Simons is getting traded, or or see that's the only option because Scoot and Shaden aren't coming off the bench. You know what I mean? I mean, I guess, well, yeah, because then, yeah, it's either Jeremy Grant's backup or it's Aiton's backup. So either way, this guy's probably going to be a backup unless it's Klingon. Well, he probably will be a backup, but he'll get to play at least probably 20 games.
So where do you have Klingon? Do you have him next?
And on my board, I have him going to Portland. Yeah,
Okay,
but
we can just
but if you have Dalton Connect or Cody Williams going to Portland, I think that's just as much of a reasonable take. That's what I think. If you want to split hairs, if you like it more.
it's okay. I think it's okay. It's okay. It doesn't matter
So
what I think.
so here's the thing. So we just got intel from our producer. I'm actually supposed to take Blazers and you're supposed to take 8 and 9 and I take 10.
Okay, go
So
ahead. Go ahead.
so yeah, so we're gonna take Klingon here. And that did happen with our producer. We did get intel
Because
in our
Bo said
earpiece.
so.
But yeah, so we're gonna go Klingon. He's a big bruiser, you know. He's kind of your old school center where he's gonna get a lot of rebounds. He's gonna catch lobs. He's gonna be just a dependable center. He's gonna be a great rim protector, a good rebounder. Is there really more I need to say? I don't think he's
No.
gonna be a guy that's gonna be scoring, 20 points a game. He's not gonna be, a real beater on the offensive end, but he is gonna be elite on the defensive end as a center. Something I would want to watch with him is his 3-point development. If he can put together 30% on the three, that'd be so huge for him. I just think it's gonna take so much work. I mean, he could do it, in 2 to 3 years, but I just think it's gonna take so long that I don't know if it's worth prioritizing it, opposed to like prioritizing like drop defense or just the IQ stuff on the offensive end, the pick and roll. I think there's just so much more to prioritize. And obviously you can see here the stat strengths and stat weaknesses. He's really good at everything else. So if they want to go that route, and he doesn't even have to be a starting center. I mean, I think when you draft a 7, you think you want to draft a starter, but in this draft, he might just be a guy that always is the 6th man and always just plays, 28, 27 minutes and gives you really good starter caliber minutes.
Yeah, I think the best pick for him as a player would probably actually go to Memphis.
Yeah,
I
I
think he
agree.
would actually benefit playing with Jaren Jackson. But
I agree. He could play next to Jaren, or he could come off the bench like Steven Adams. I agree with that. Yeah.
yeah,
So now it's your pick, 8 and 9.
okay. So for 8, I guess. Notice how we still have Nikola Topic. We still have Topic there. Okay, so for round 8 and 9, we're getting towards the end. Like for kind of a weird draft, we are getting towards the end of the lottery a bit, and so I think we're just gonna go with another 3-and-D guy.
And this is going to San Antonio.
This is going to San Antonio. Another 3-and-D guy, who just needs to put on some weight. And why not pair Wimby with another French player? And I put Tijane. Is that how you pronounce his name?
It is T.
T.
I gotta see it to pronounce it.
I don't want to say it wrong.
Yeah, Tijan Salon, I think.
Tijan Salon.
Yeah.
I think you want to pick a project.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a project, 3D guy. You're still looking for that guard. I think the Spurs think that they can pull a guard from some other team. I don't think they're looking to. This is the guy they're pairing up. They need a playmaker.
Stephon Castle could be their lead guard too.
Yeah, that too. So, yeah, I think this one's easy. You're towards the end of the draft. Raw talent here. I think maybe is he the youngest?
One of the younger guys. Yeah.
He's. I'm just looking him up right now. He's 18 years old.
Yeah, he's not gonna be 19 until after the draft. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it's not the age of when your parents have to sign with you yet. I guess that's 17.
Say that again?
when your parents have to be there for you to like actually sign the contract.
Really? That's a
I think
thing.
it's 17. Yeah, I think it's 17.
Oh
That's what
wow.
Kobe had to do, right? That's what the high school players had to do.
Yeah, I guess if you're coming out of high school, yeah. Yeah, that's funny. That's funny that you know that. I don't know that. I never knew that. Interesting. I guess it makes sense though. But yeah, I mean, I have no problems with the pick. They're just gonna try to make a French team over there. You know, it would have been great if they could have got Risache at 4. Then they could have built, and that obviously that's too many forwards there,
Team
but
France.
yeah, just Team France, yeah.
They're all
Um,
speaking French while the opposing team is speaking English when they're calling
right.
sets.
The ultimate communication that can't be interrupted. Yeah.
Well, Popovich,
Uh,
yeah.
so who are you picking for the Grizz here now that I think big man is off the board?
uh, I think I'll pick another interesting guy. I'll pick Cody Williams.
Yeah,
I think he fits in good. I think he's a little bit of a scorer. He's kind of like a Slim Reaper, maybe like a Brandon Ingram kind of guy. He's a
really.
good spot up shooter. He's young. He has a good wingspan. I think he, with how the question marks surrounding the Memphis Grizzlies, you know, small forward spot around there. They already know who's going to be point. They already know who's going to be center. They kind of know that they want to lean on Marcus Smart to be that Dylan Brooks role a little bit, but it's always a question mark that they're just sort of flipping in players around that 3-4 spot. And so I think you're gonna have, and we've seen that it's been Jaw. It's been Jaw has always needed help with a scoring punch. You do have Desmond Bain, but that 3-4 has always been a question mark. And it would be a good rotation piece too. Brandon Clark isn't known as as a great scorer, and their small forward is still up for grabs. I mean, I feel like last year they were just, I think the starting small forward switched up a lot with Zaire and Yves, and so I think
GG
Cody
probably got
Williams.
some minutes there as well.
Yeah, they all got minutes down there, but I think it makes a lot of sense to have Cody Williams because he's a small forward who can score, and I think they'd be very happy knowing that they were to get him because I could have seen him go a lot sooner. So that's what I have.
Yeah, here's what I'll say about the pick here. I don't necessarily if I agree with the assessment of the player, but I agree with the team and why they would get him. I think that here's what I think he is. I think he's a great 3-and-D guy who needs to put on weight, and there's a lot of concerns about his injuries that he had at Colorado, but I think if he can put together a really good developmental plan and not have to be rushed into a team that needs help like the Hornets, like the Blazers, and be on a team that can ease him into it. I think he'd be a great 3-and-D player. My comp for him is kind of a Trey Murphy, Jaden McDaniels kind of guy. I think he can be a really good high impact defender. He can make threes at a high level. And he's young, so he's going to be a bit of a project as well. But with the Memphis Grizzlies, I think you have a good enough team here. You add a center maybe in free agency, but you have a good enough team here where you don't have to have a rookie coming in impacting the game in day one. And obviously, it helps that he's Jalen Williams' brother as well, and that's kind of some NBA pedigree there as well. So,
Yeah, that is
you
the
know,
thing. He's actually playing better than Jalen Williams was when he was coming into the draft too.
yeah,
He's
yeah, that's
actually like,
true.
yeah,
He it's so funny because I don't know, it's hard to say with this draft, but he's gonna get drafted higher than his brother did.
yeah,
Most likely he could slip into the teens, but he most likely will get drafted higher. And I do think that when he was healthy, he had a better season than his brother, at least comparatively to the competition, because his brother was playing in Santa Clara, he's playing in Colorado, so it's a bit different of competition. But yeah, I like the pick, I really do.
yeah. If this is a steal of the draft, it's Cody.
I think he could be, yeah. And it's funny because it's the team that probably needs him the least, besides the Hawks. So, but last pick here, the top 10. This one's really tough for me, because I think that with the Jazz where they're at, I think they want a guy that has really high upside, and I think they would have loved Ron Holland if he was here. But and I want to take Dillingham, but they just took point guard last year with Keontae George, and I think if you want to have any thought that Keontae George can be a guy in the future, I don't think you can draft Rob here. And I think with his injury, I think it's little early to draft Topic. I'm gonna go Devin Carter. Yeah, I'm gonna go Devin Carter out of Providence here. I think he's a guy that a lot of teams have been really loving lately. I think he's gonna go top 10, maybe not to the Jazz, but somewhere in the top 10. Um, and from what I've been hearing, he's been killing workouts. He's a point guard, but he's a point guard that I think can play with Keontae George. Obviously, he's bigger than Rob Dillingham. I mean, every other player is. No disrespect to Rob in this draft, but he's got an extra 10 pounds on him and an extra 2 inches. So, but yeah, I mean, he's a good shooter. He's a good playmaker. He's a great rebounder as a guard. He really doesn't have that many flaws. I will say the one flaw is probably his age because he is a little bit older. He's going to be 23, I believe, very soon. And so, obviously that's going to kind of knock on your, draft, your, I guess, evaluation a little bit, because you don't know how much better he's going to get. But he's really athletic, and I just think he fits everything that the Jazz need in a prospect right now. And I even think like the Jazz are the front office that can be like, we just started our rebuild. We're gonna have so many picks that we don't really have to worry about finding that young guy, that super young guy right now, because by the time we're good, he's only gonna be hopefully 26, 27, and that's still young enough to be a part of a championship team. So, yeah, I think he's been doing really well in workouts. That's what I've heard. And so that's who they're gonna take here.
Yeah, he's interesting though because he's never really he's had a hard path, up until now, and it's been a lot of stuff weighing down on him with when your dad is an former NBA player, and you're just, you start and what was his first college? I know he transferred. I think he transferred into Providence. But
Let's see.
he had to go ahead and he had to transfer from into Providence and then work hard, be at these workouts nonstop. The dude was yeah, and you said he's been killing workouts. The guy is a worker.
That's what I've been hearing. I've been hearing he's kind of like the Jaime Jaquez of this draft, where he's a little bit older, but he's been killing all the workouts. And so he's been getting a lot of attention because of that, but also because he has good NBA production. In Providence, in that conference, it's not a cakewalk. So yeah, I mean, I think that he has the intangibles and he has the production to go there. I just don't know how much teams are factoring in the age thing, because I think it does matter if you're drafting really high. But if you're drafting at 10 in this draft, I don't know if you care all that much. But he transferred from SC State.
SC State,
or not SC State, just South Carolina.
He had a lot of expectations, yeah, top. I mean, he was a good pick. I don't know if he was 5-star. I wouldn't say he was 5.
No,
I think he probably
and
was
even then
probably
it's
4, maybe
yeah, and
3.
even then it's kind of hard to remember, right? Because that was so he's been at Providence for 2 years. This would have been his second year. For viewers that are wondering, I had to grab my charger. He's been at Providence for 2 years, and then his freshman year in 2021 was at South Carolina. He ended up starting 7 games, but then he transferred, and then he started every single game he played in after that.
Yeah.
And he started
Dude
over 66 college games.
But it's the durability, it's the hounding, because you're shorter than most guys on the court. You're gonna be playing gosh, who are some people that come to mind? Who's the guy? Pelicans.
Jose Alvarado?
like Jose Alvarado. Just I don't know about like the defensive like prowess, but the intensity. Jose Alvarado, AO,
Yeah, you're gonna play some
even
good
Chris
on-ball
Dunn.
defenders. I
Yeah,
I don't even think it's those kind of guys you have to worry about. I think it's the tall guys you have to worry about. You have to worry about the Men Thompsons. You got to worry about the what's his name? Also on the Pelicans. Taller point guard. What's his name? Dyson Daniels.
yeah.
You got to worry about those kind of guys that are going to be 5 inches or so taller than you,
But like,
and they're
look at
gonna,
that.
you know,
His
so
look at his minutes played plus his minutes his per 36. Like, the dude is playing 36.
yeah,
36 minutes a game, and he's averaging a block. He's
hmm
averaging a block at 6'2"
yeah, and 2 steals. He's a good
and two
defender.
steals. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
he's a good.
it's just
I mean, he's a good player. I with Jaime Jaquez and Devin Carter, it's never been the type of thing where it's like, oh well, they have this and this to work on, and they're they're probably not going to be able to do it. They're good at a lot of stuff, but they're just older, so you know that they're just not going to get much better. Whereas like a guy like Rob Dillingham, if he is somehow, some way able to put on 15 pounds of muscle by his second or third year, if he's 200 pounds instead of 184 or whatever, or I think actually I think he's like 165. If he can get up to like 185 instead, and then he can put together like a really good offensive season his second or third year, then I think it's like, well, why don't we just take this guy? Because yeah, you may not get the defense right away, but you're going to get the upside.
mm,
Um, so, but yeah, if you want to look at here we go, we got our top 10 that we picked here. I'll kind of read them as we go. We got Alex Hard going number 1 to the Hawks. Zachary Ricochet going number 2 to the Wizards. We got Reed Shepard going number 3 to the Rockets. Stephon Castle going number 4 to the San Antonio Spurs. We got Matas Buzelis going number 5 to the Detroit Pistons. We got Ron Holland going number 6 to the Charlotte Hornets. We got Donovan Clean going number 7 to the Portland Trailblazers. We got Dijon Salon going number 8 to the San Antonio Spurs. We got Cody Williams going number 9 to the Memphis Grizzlies. And we got Devin Carter going number 10 to the Utah Jazz. Overall, Gage, how are you feeling about our mock? You think it'll be somewhat accurate?
I have no. I think okay. So let's step away from the draft. I
Okay.
think this off season is going to be insane. I think it's starting to, things
Heat
are
up.
starting to boil up a little bit,
Yeah.
and so a lot of these guys might be just traded on off night. They're gonna be like picks shifted back and forth, and everything's destroyed because I think people are thinking these picks are disposable, but they're
Yeah.
still draft picks, and so you know, like we finished off with Devin Carter. He's one of the highest floors in the draft.
Yep.
If you need a guy like him off the bench, you can just pick him up. He's at 23. He'll just hop and do his thing. Your team will improve. This this off season is just way too crazy. And
It's hard to
that's
get a
like
gauge on it. No pun
yeah,
intended.
yeah. uh, so I kind of want to talk about a few players like outside of the top 10, some
Uh-huh.
like of the flashier names.
Yeah.
Uh, First of all, let's talk about Nikola.
Nikola Topic.
Yes.
Um, my thing with him is he's going to be a tall point guard that's going to be able to be a good playmaker. And he's going to be able to be a good finisher on the inside. He's also very young as well. But I don't know if he's ever going to be an upside 3-point shooter. I don't know, like a lot of the guys in this draft, if he's going to be able to create his own shot. But he is going to be a tall playmaker. He reminds me a lot of Giddey, but I wouldn't say as good of a playmaker. He's a good passer. There's a difference. I think he's a good passer. He can find guys where they need to be at, but he's just not, I guess, as creative. And kind of where he gets guys in their spots and how he like draws the play up, and obviously that has a lot to do with him being able to create his own shot, right? But obviously, and then we know about the injury that he had, the partially torn ACL. I think it was kind of lingering at the end of his season, and then it got a lot worse in the combine, or that's when it finally actually tore. So I think teams are going to take that into account. But I think if it's a team like the Grizzlies or the Lakers or Sixers who are in those mid-teens, I think they would easily pull the trigger on him for sure.
Yeah, I think you know, it's interesting because I think his play style, he's already chosen to live and die by the pick and roll. And I
Mm,
mean, that's okay. I'm okay with living and dying by the pick and roll because that's a great play. If you're like, you know what,
yeah,
I'm going to be the generation's like pick and roll player, and that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to perfect it to a craft. And as young as he is, you'd argue if you just pair him up with some sort of center who can actually roll and is arguably just as good as he is and reading the signs, you could have like your own miniature like Karl Malone, John Stockton thing. But John Stockton in this case is what 6'7". Um, it's
yeah.
so
But John
the
Stockton was a good offensive player in his own right, I think the big difference.
yeah, he was a good offensive player in his own right. But I'm saying the pick and roll,
As far as
it's
the play, yeah.
it it's like if you watch him, it's like every other play. It's gonna be okay. We're gonna pick and roll, and he's gonna know the passing lane. This guy, he, I mean, he just it's just I mean, even with transition, he kind of looks like the actual other, Nikola in the league. He can see those transition passes. He can see those passes. Um, it's just bad that he tore his ACL, and then you don't really know like how a guy his age will recover. You think he'll bounce back. How much will he lose? Well, he does like to attack the basket. And that keeps him a threat. He does like to use that when he does do those pick and rolls.
Yeah.
Um, and so when people can, if you're allowed to play up a little bit tighter, I don't know how, you know, that will do. But I mean, because if teams are, able to play a little tighter on you, how much you can't drive by them because he
Well,
had
that's
a
what I'm.
good
Then
three
that's why I
point
said he's
shooting
going to have to
clip.
develop the 3-point shot
Yeah, he had a little bit
to
of
make
a
guys
decent.
pay.
Yeah,
Because otherwise, they're just going to double on the roller and then have a weak side help defender come over. But if he can shoot the three and have his guy commit to his shot, then the pick and roll will be even more free.
yeah, but even then, he wasn't even athletic to begin with, so
Hmm.
you might give him a pass, I guess, for tearing his ACL. Because
Yeah, it's just going to depend on what teams think about him.
yeah, so yeah, he's interesting. Uh, where do you have him?
Where do I have him going? Or
Yeah,
am I on my big board?
just where he's going. What do you think?
Um, it's hard to say. I have him going around 12, 13 range. Um, yeah, if we pull this up here, I think he could easily go to the Bulls. Don't think he would go to the Thunder. I do think that the Kings, a team that could let him sit like the Kings or the Heat or the Sixers, are definitely in play here. I even think at 14 to Portland, if you're Portland, you can say confidently, we really got two guys that could go top 10 if that injury didn't happen. I think you really got to feel good about that as a young team that really just needs prospects. Um, so yeah, I think around there. What about you?
I think, given that almost every player here is a project of some sort, including a guy off of a torn ACL. Uh, I'm gonna put him right above 20. I'm gonna put him right, actually, either 20 or 21. I think. I
You
think
think
he
it's
just
gonna
gets
make a big
drafted.
difference?
Yeah, I think he just gets drafted to just get drafted and just sit. So
Yeah.
maybe he gets drafted to a competitor. Maybe he gets drafted to the Bucks or something like that. Someone he could just sit. Mm, I mean,
The Raptors lost their pick. I feel like they'd feel pretty good about getting a talent of his caliber at 19 since they lost their own pick.
yeah,
But
but
yeah,
not for
probably
another
around there.
year. I mean, he's
What?
like another Joel. He's a Joel Embiid situation or Nerlens Noel situation kind of guy.
Nerlens Noel is a better example, yeah,
Mm.
I think. Let's have a few words about Rob Dillingham. My thing with Rob is that I love his offensive game. I think he's a really creative shot creator. He's one of the only guys in this draft that's good at creating his own shot. Um, And I think he can be a talented offensive player in limited minutes, but I would be scared to death if he was playing 30, 32 minutes a game because he just doesn't have the frame for it. I think he would have a lot of trouble getting past a lot of guys. He's not the greatest at getting to the rack, and when he does, in the NBA, it's not going to work out very well for him because he's so small and weak. Um, but if he can just be a guy like Lou Williams who comes off the bench for 17 minutes per game, shoots some threes, finds some guys as a connector passer, I think he could be really good. Now, if he can just put on, and I say just, but if he can put on 20 pounds and just be 185, I think that would be so big for his development. Because at that point, I can see him being a real defender, or not defender. I can see him being a real starter, is what I meant to say. I can see him then playing 30 minutes a game. But at 164, I mean, I just couldn't imagine being in the NBA being that slim, where pretty much every other player, every single game is bigger and stronger than you. Because not only is he 164, but he's 6'2". So with a 6'3" wingspan, I mean, he's not long either. So yeah, it's just the physical limitations with him really hurt his stock, I think.
Yeah. It's something about these OTE players that are just so shifty.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Like college D1 athletes or whatever, they can be shifty, but like most of the time they're so disciplined that they don't even try those things out.
hmm
But like in overtime elite, you're just like, all right, I'm gonna be super high volume, I'm gonna be shifty, and
Because
I'm
you
gonna do
can be,
whatever.
right?
But you can be. It's something that instills this confidence into these
Yeah.
players because they feel like they can just do this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because like you're kind of in the feel of a miniature like NBA game, but everyone's your age and you can do windmills and your team is called Super Drippy Sauce
Yeah.
Squad or
It's
something
like
like
an
that.
AAU team.
Yeah, on steroids.
Yeah, yeah,
So like,
exactly. On a bigger
so like,
stage. Yeah.
yeah. So you can just like, yeah, and then, I mean, he ended up going to Kentucky, and like you said, Kentucky guys translate. And
Typically, yeah. Mhm.
yeah, but uh, I think he's interesting. I think he's just a fun. He's gonna be fun to watch.
He's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about one more guy here. Well,
Let's talk about two, and then
let's talk
three.
about
Actually,
two.
two and three. Okay? Zach Edey.
Okay, there we go. And
There you
yeah,
go.
because I had another guy I wanted to talk about as well. Zach Edey, he's a guy where throughout the whole process, up until maybe a few weeks ago, until I think the combine, it might have been like a month ago, I was so worried about his ability to play in the NBA. And don't get me wrong, I still am really worried about it. I am. Because I don't think he's going to ever be able to be a full-time starter. But his production in college is just insane. 25, 12, 2 blocks, only turned the ball over 2 times. And obviously, like, we talk about how he was insane stats-wise, but he won a lot of games too with Purdue, as the guy. And so, yeah, I mean, I just think that matters a lot to teams. It's just with him being 7'5", I used to think that since teams know that his cap ceiling is pretty stunted, I couldn't see him going lottery, but I can definitely see him going right outside the lottery because I think he can be valuable in a league where every year you get a guy like Alex Sarr or Chet Holmgren or Victor Wembanyama who are these huge towers that are tall, and it's not going to get any shorter. It's going to get taller. And he's a guy that you can put on them for 20 minutes, maybe a little bit less, 18-ish minutes, and you can feel a lot better about it versus if you have a guy that's a little like 7 feet who might be a little shorter, which is crazy to say that you're 7 feet and you're shorter than the guy that you're matching up against. But at the end of the day, we're gonna have to start having these centers where they're just so big that they won't be able to easily just put it in the bucket. You know, we talked about Donovan Clingan earlier, him being 7'2" with a huge wingspan. Another guy that's going to be able to be not only just as tall, but a little bit taller than a guy like Alex Sarr, or any other center that's an average 7 feet 6'11". So yeah, I definitely think that with his production, along with kind of how the NBA is going, that'll get him drafted in the teens for sure. I think I think a team like the Lakers would be a pretty interesting fit, because I think he could play with Anthony Davis and be a five. I think a team like even the Magic would be pretty interesting, although I think they would want to go with a guy that has a little bit higher upside. Um, I think the Cavs could be interesting if they want to move on from Jared Allen. Um, so yeah, I mean, lots of good options here, I think, in the teens for him.
Yeah, it's just if you want to lean into that. You know what happened last time? Like, I mean, the game has moved away from Zach Edey's style of play a little bit, but he's not really an aggressive player. I mean, Purdue ran their offense through Zach Edey. That's okay. It's not his fault. It's not that he was aggressive and looking for the ball most of the time. It's just kind of like passive, like, I'm gonna run the offense and that's just how it's gonna be. He wasn't really, you know, too ball dominant, but you have to have a hope that given that he is able to use his size and position himself, he's just this. You got to believe that he's this kind of player because he knows that that's what's going to get him to the dub. He knows that he's going to have to be a huge 7 foot,
Five.
300, yeah, a
Yeah.
7'5" guy, and just play like this old school kind of basketball game
Yeah.
in order to win, and it's worked.
It has
Um,
worked. Yeah.
and that's why it's a little bit different than the Jahlil Okafor case, because that's just kind of who Jahlil was. He was just kind of a back to the basket kind of guy. Some hooks and some nice moves, but Zach Edey just seems like he knows where he has to go. That's different. He's been losing weight. He's been putting in, he's been changing his body a little bit as he's gone through. He is a senior now, right? Yeah, he's a senior.
Yeah.
So it seems like he's willing to make the change to the NBA game, depending on how much he can keep from college. How much of a change that will have to be, I don't know. You know, if you think that he's okay, you can put him against. I mean, you could always already plug him and play him against like Jokic or Embiid, the biggest guys, and you know, and he could probably handle it physically. I would actually most definitely handle it physically.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I could see the Lakers picking him up, but yeah, it is yeah.
Who is the next guy you want to talk about?
Uh, the last guy, Kelsey. He's not even on this list.
Keisei, Tominaga.
Yeah, he's not
What
even
do
on
you
this
want to
list.
say about him? I mean, I don't
I
have
just
too
want to
much to
say,
say about him.
I just want to say, he's just interesting. Like
He's interesting.
the confidence in 3-point shot is something that I think a lot of teams would be willing to take a chance on towards the very end of the draft when you're just like, here's a summer league spot. He already got
Mm.
signed. He's on the Japanese national team. He got signed by Steph Curry brand. I think he's, at this point you can always call guys up and you can just say, "Hey, you want to like try out?" But I think there is there are some teams that are just interested in seeing what he could do. He's a liability, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to say about him. He's a good 3-point shooter, but at the end of the day, there's just so many more guys that have so much higher potential than him, and I think that's a big reason why he won't get drafted. I'm putting my flag down. I don't think he'll get drafted this year. I think he will get picked up by a team, but I don't think it'll be during the draft. And we got Sam, our producer here, trying to find him in this list, and he's nowhere to be found because he's just not that guy. I think teams have a pretty good feel about if a guy is worth being drafted, and it's funny because you may think that 60 players
what
is a lot of players, but in
what was his
NCAA or
awards
in
this
your
year? What did
when
he get
when
any
you
awards? I think from Big Ten, any Big Ten.
he might have got second team all conference, but it's just different, you know. I think that teams understand that that they're not necessarily going to translate into the NBA, you know. It's kind of just like you just mentioned Joel Okafor. Like in hindsight, you'd have been like, you know, it kind of makes sense why he didn't translate in the NBA, you know, because he was a one-trick pony, a lot like Tominaga. Um, thing I want to end the podcast with here is Bronny James.
Yeah,
Where where do you see his range at in the draft here?
the dude is an absolute, you know.
Train wreck. No, I'm just
Let's
kidding.
be clear.
I'm
Let's
just
be
kidding.
clear.
Okay.
If this was a draft if this was a draft and like the only thing you had to do in the NBA was manage press conferences, he's a lottery pick. You know, like you gotta understand, like people his age, I don't know how well they'd be able to manage. Like, oh, are you gonna be as good as your dad? Do you want to play for dad, or how does your dad, weighing yourself? Like, do you ever feel like you can ever live up to any of those expectations whatsoever? That would destroy a kid. Every time anything good happens, it's because of your dad. But he's handled it pretty well. And he has the work ethic too. I think he's moved on from that heart condition, which unfortunately dents his stock a little bit. I think a while ago we were thinking that he was going to be a first round draft pick at some point. But with the heart condition, with a subpar season at USC, and he didn't even, USC was more of a mediocre team this year. So you're going to be
Usually
leaning
are, yeah.
into what he did in Sierra Canyon a little bit. You're not going to be looking towards what he did at USC. So what has he shown at USC, and what did he show at USC? He showed that he's a solid, defender. He's quick. He can use his strength. He can translate a little bit off of, the pick and rolls a lot nicer than most guards his size. I think he has a pretty good vertical. I think it was, you have it on the screen. He has a 40-inch vertical. One thing he's been trying to improve on is his 3-point shot. And, amongst a lot of other things, there's not really anything he does very well on the offensive end. And that can be detrimental because his defense isn't like, all team, defender coming out of college. So, and the interesting part though is that Bronny is always, I feel like he's almost peaked out in physical ability, and what he can do to improve his game now is probably just basketball IQ. We kind of know what kind of player he is. He's a little passive. He can cut pretty well, but is he really a playmaker like his dad?
So in the sum of things, where do you see him going, or what range?
He's just not ready for the NBA. I think. Here's the thing. I think if teams really cared about Bronny, I don't think he gets drafted.
Yeah.
I think if they actually cared about him, he doesn't get drafted at all.
Mm-hmm.
But since we're in the NBA, and
they care about his dad.
They care about his dad. They care about like views. They care about all these
the
nonsense.
Other stuff.
Someone is just gonna pick him up and just to do controversy. Let him play in the summer league. Sheesh. I don't know what's gonna happen in the summer league.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. I'm gonna keep my eyes on that for sure. Can you click on his profile again, Sam? Let's pull that up. So here's kind of what I think about him. I think that he has never really shown me to be a good offensive player. He has good intangibles in times on defense, but otherwise, and he's a good athlete. But otherwise, I just don't see a path where he's going to get a whole lot better. Now, I do think there's a role for him to be a rotation player in the NBA. Don't get me wrong, and I agree with you that the heart condition did knock down his momentum and his draft stock and everything like that. And honestly, USC sucks at developing players outside of Evan Mobley. I mean, if you look at their track record, I mean, who have they really developed? I mean, did KPJ develop all that well? No. Did Isaiah Collier in this draft develop well? No. Did Bronny James develop well? No. They just kind of suck at developing players. Um, so I think all that, yeah, you're right. I mean, it definitely goes against him, but he doesn't do himself any favors either. And so my range of him getting drafted is probably that 50 to 60 range. I mean, I know it kind of sounds a little bit safe, but I think that's probably where he goes. Probably goes to the Lakers at 55 if he's not gone by then. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Pistons took him either. They just try to throw a dart at LeBron, you know. But anyways, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we close this thing down today?
Uh, uh, uh,
You could just
I
say no.
how it's no. I think it's just crazy how they have a second day of just winning
Mm.
Bronny, like for just Bronny.
I mean, it's gonna be a thing permanently now. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's kind of goofy. I don't
But
really
like,
think it's needed,
I
you
mean,
know.
it's interesting. The second round pick, it's interesting. I would, some people like to stay up all night and watch it, but like, no one's gonna watch because, I mean, you can have Jokic, sure.
The real
Jokic went
sickos are
second.
gonna watch the second day of the draft, you know. The real guys are that are gonna be like digging through their sheet and being like, "Do I got this guy at 38? No, he has a 44. This guy's here. This guy's here." You know, I, I don't know, but it's something. It's interesting for sure. Well, anyways, thank you for listening. We're gonna try to get back on our content a little bit stronger here now that the finals have ended. We're gonna have a lot of off-season stuff, some free agency, but yeah, I guess we're just gonna have to keep you in surprise, and hopefully we get some more tier lists and some new content out for you. So, I've been Peyton Thompson.
I've engaged Zolakoffer.
Thanks for listening.